Welcome to the Mental Insights Podcast, a conversation aimed at understanding all sides of mental health, addiction recovery, and homelessness. Each interview will include one's personal experiences and insights, or an expert's advice and knowledge within one of these fields. The goal is to promote awareness, guidance, and support for anyone who is affected by these challenges. Thank you all for listening. Welcome back to the Mental Insights Podcast. This is your host, Brennan Catulli. We are here today with Clive Agius. Clive is a university student studying philosophy and psychology. Clive has experience working with children with learning and developmental challenges throughout the summer. Clive is also the host of the Profound Mind podcast, which addresses mental health through the analysis of books, movies, and shows. Clive will join the Mental Insights podcast to speak about children with learning development and mental health within youth in the summer school setting. Clive, thank you for taking this time out to be on the Mental Insights podcast. It's great to have you here.
Hello, thank you for having me. Yeah, I am Clive Agius. Thank you for having me on this podcast. This is my first interview, and I am really excited to get going.
Wonderful. Thank you, Clive. And to really get going, I like to just bring about a statistic or a note within what topic we're going to be speaking about, and specifically within part one of this episode. As you are the guest, we're going to be speaking initially about children with learning development. And within this, I found a statistic from the CDC that says 1 in 6 U.S. children aged 2 to 8, so that's about 17.4%, had a diagnosed mental, behavioral, or developmental disorder. So within this kind of realm of seeing how prominent it is within young age, kind of what are we seeing within child specifically within the mental health realm, and speak a little bit about the experience that you've had within children with learning development issues.
So the statistic that you mentioned, it's quite insane. How it's like 17.4. You said percent.
Correct.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I think in the near future it's going to keep on like raising, because like there's more awareness about like the symptoms. We get to know more sort of how children act, and we need to take more action so we can provide them with the best environment they can. And when I was working in the summer, I feel that where I live in Malta, so Malta is under Italy, it's in Europe, and it's very different to United States. I mean, United States is very Western, you could say, and Malta is sort of Western, but it is still conservative. We are Catholic. We are very Catholic, and we don't like change, and sort of we are still behind in like helping children develop and giving them all the support we need. So the statistic of 17.4 in Malta, it's I didn't get any statistics with me, unfortunately, but I think in Malta there's less awareness on this subject.
One question I really have is, how does a parent's habits, how does a parent's kind of motives influence, impact, and affect a child's development?
A parent is basically the first. I mean, they're like exposed to the parents first. It's like the most important environment. They have to be stimulated in ways that's very healthy to them. That's providing them with all the resources they need. All they need to be shown validation, because having neglected children is very sad, because they wouldn't sort of their potential wouldn't be seen, and their ability would sort of get overlooked, which is quite sad. So the parents play a huge role when it comes to children with learning disabilities, because um, us Maltese overall, we find it very difficult to provide them with the support, because it's very stigmatizing. We are very stigmatizing as a culture, I feel, overall. But it's slowly getting better, I feel. And parents do have a huge role in the upbringing. The environment is really important. And as they get older, the relationship will help them live out better in life.
Wonderful, and I love you brought up of the aspect of the environment being such an important aspect. You know, you're speaking how parents are, you know, a firsthand role of how a child can develop. And you know, as you're speaking about this, what are some other factors that may impact a child's learning development?
I mean, we cannot deny the fact that there might be some biological aspects to a certain scenario. For example, a child or like a mother who suffers from bipolar disorder, there's a high chance that she might pass it to her children. You know, so that might be another factor. But not speaking biologically, so environmentally, the parents were a factor. Also socially, the company you make, the friends you have. So basically, if you associate yourself with a certain subset of people that are very neglecting and not providing you with the support you need, the upbringing or like the relationship you have with society overall wouldn't you wouldn't like give your all, sort of. It's very limiting to you. So you need to expose yourself to a healthy and social um, the environment and the social aspect usually intertwine with each other. That's really important to sort of have a group, a set of friends that could really understand you and you could share and you can be vulnerable with them. So there's this aspect of vulnerability when it comes to the social aspect.
Such a crucial part of how a child can develop. Within your own experiences of working with these children, you know, what are some of the treatment measures for learning development at a young age for a child?
So I went to this workshop in the summer. It was a drama therapy workshop, and it was very interesting. They actually do it for children with learning disabilities and children who suffer from mental disorders. And it's really amazing how there's these really therapies that are not quite known, but when they are implemented, they could actually be really beneficial to them. Like, I recently had a presentation on Lego based therapy with a few colleagues of mine, and went over how Lego therapy could be really helpful for children with autism. And in that presentation, we saw how Lego therapy improved the relationship with the parent, the relationship with the therapist. So that's a very specific type there. But overall, the therapies that our country is using right now, play therapy is the most prominent one that would help children with autism, because I feel that it is quite natural to play. It is quite natural to reach out, the child to reach out and sort of express their emotions through play, because that's their natural instinct, you could say. And it's it's quite it's quite sad to see that certain children aren't given this sort of um, not ability, I would say, but this sort of opportunity to engage in play freely, because play is the most important thing you could engage in. And it is it is a therapy as well, because some 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 mothers or some parents who are not very aware they are employing play, so they would need the help of a therapist to make it more enriching, more nourishing for the child.
I love that you bring that up in terms of, you know, how the parent's role plays a vital aspect in making these next steps. And, you know, you spoke a little bit about the importance of the environment. And I just want to know, how can someone in your role be able to monitor and facilitate the right, development for a child from being at home and then being at school? How are you able to monitor and make sure that they're getting the right development in both settings?
Their needs overlooking a child's development, it is very detrimental to their mental health, and especially if they suffer from a learning disability like autism, Asperger's, ADHD. It's it's very hard on them, and to do it all by themselves, they need a lot of resilience to go through it on their own, because a child is meant to be stimulated by a good environment and good parents, and not having that is really detrimental to them. Children with autism, they have a lot of potential to make change in society, and most of them made massive contributions, in fact. Like, if you if you go back these past few decades, a lot of sort of intellectuals, you could say, suffered from a mental disorder or like a learning disability like ADHD, autism, and they they managed to get through it. They managed to sort of surmount or like overcome their disability. I wouldn't say overcome, but managing the symptoms and being being in tune with what you are, and sort of accepting the fact that one has the disability and there's nothing you can do to change it, but you can improve the situation. There needs to be resources, there needs to be a healthy environment, as we said, and most importantly, for the child to be given the freedom to explore and do their own thing.
When you're really looking at a lot of these challenges that childs may face at the young ages, you look at a lot of things that can be some of the causes of this, such as childhood trauma. Can you speak a little bit about the lasting effects of childhood trauma and, how that plays a role within childhood learning development?
The subject of childhood trauma, I think, is very intense. I haven't personally spoken about it in my podcast because it is quite sensitive, but I will give it a go nonetheless. So childhood trauma can be very detrimental to a child's development. Being exposed to a certain action or to certain abuse by the parent or the caregiver or another individual, it will alter their development drastically, because trauma trauma changes a person in a lot of ways, and some people experienced a lot of traumas in their past, but they actually managed to surmount them and sort of, you could say, get over them, but it's still very difficult for them, because there is still this, you could say, lingering, the trauma still exists within you, but
Hmm.
it's overcome.
Within your role over the summer, I just want to know, within your experience, and obviously you're educating yourself now at school, what are kind of some things that you see as, new treatment measures or new ways that we need to go about assisting children within the learning development programs?
There's plenty of room for like improvement in therapy. So when I was working in the summer, I really felt that children with learning disabilities would really be benefit from a lot of external help. I mean, I was working as a child support worker, which was meant to be there for the child who is suffering from a learning disability. In my case, I had a girl who was right hemiplegia, which is a paralysis in one side of the body, but it brings about symptoms of sort of learning, finding it hard to learn. The attention span wasn't there. It's quite similar. It's quite similar you could say, autism, because they find it hard to stay focused on one task and they get distracted very easily. Autism or ADHD, you could say in this case. And the new therapies that would really help children, from what I read and what I studied with my colleagues, I had told you we had done this presentation on Lego therapy, and it was really the results we got from it, and what we gathered as a whole was that Lego therapy was really beneficial for children with learning disabilities, for children with autism, and it really improved the children's performance in how they act with their parents, with the therapist herself or himself. Um, so so I am really happy that there's a lot of new therapies out here in the world, and there's always some, like, we can always experiment with new therapies, because there isn't a therapy that is adequate for every individual. It's quite subjective. And I was I had an exam this morning today, and it was about critical psychology, and I might seem like I'm going off topic, but I'll get to why I'm bringing it up. So in this exam, it takes a lot of the individual's experience, and sort of we have to really understand what the individual is going through, and really understand what type of therapy would work for him or her, and not sort of employ the most tradition based or research based therapy. Sometimes it's good to divert from the regular approaches, maybe try something new. Or the DSM-5 is there to be to as a guide, basically, for diagnosing, but it shouldn't be used. It shouldn't, like, be extremely relied on. So when I think of new therapies, I think of the context and culture the individuals are living in, especially those with learning disabilities.
I think that's great to bring up. Speak more about how the roles of therapies can continue to be implemented and changed throughout the years, which is definitely something of the utmost importance. I think this is a good time to conclude our discussion within children with learning development, and we will transition over to part two of this episode, which is mental health within youth in the summer school setting. So I would like to thank you all for listening to part one of this episode with Clive. So thank you all for listening.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you all for listening to today's episode of the Mental Insights Podcast. Make sure to reach out to today's guest or myself if you need any advice, guidance, or support in your life today. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and review to this podcast so we know what you thought of this episode. And thank you all again for listening to this episode, and I look forward to being in touch with you all in the next episode. I hope you all have a wonderful day.